In just a few decades, the video game industry has grown larger than both the movie and music industries, becoming one of the most dominant forces in global entertainment thanks to its sheer economic power despite only being around for a few decades. But in the last 10 years, a noticeable shift has reshaped a part of the gaming landscape. A new wave of video games born in Asia have exploded onto the scene, taking over a considerable portion of today's video game market. These titles aren't just popular, they're becoming cultural phenomenons, especially across the Pacific, where modern anime and manga surge into mainstream culture. Meanwhile, the West's traditional video game blockbuster model is faltering. AAA studios keep doubling down on $100 million bets, only to face increasingly hostile audiences. Their surefire strategy yielding increasingly diminishing results due to bloated budgets and tired formulas. These circumstances have provided a stage for the so-called gacha games, which spark fierce debates wherever they're discussed openly. Scrolling through social media will reveal armies of players decrying them as predatory. Just digital slot machines dressed up as entertainment, designed around psychologically manipulating players into draining their wallets. On the surface, this outrage seems universal, but digging deeper will make contradictions start to emerge.
Oh my god, HSR is such a crazy good game, bro. Oh my, I love HSR, bro. I love HSR, bro. Oh my lord. Oh my lord.
This is because, for all the vocal criticism gacha games receive, they still command a large, devoted following, made up of players who engage willingly and enthusiastically. The contrast is even sharper in the East. What Westerners condemn as exploitative, Asian players embrace as mainstream entertainment. There's a cultural divide here that can't be simply dismissed away with mere outrage. It may be a hard truth to swallow, but these games deliver experiences potent enough to override ethical concerns. Maybe it's due to the addictive rewards and gameplay loops. Maybe it's the art and characters that cater to specific audiences. Whatever it may be, it keeps players coming back, even those already acquainted with the system. Before understanding their impact, we'll have to answer three fundamental questions. What exactly is a gacha game? Where did they come from? And how did this controversial model become so widespread in today's gaming ecosystem? Even as governments worldwide crack down on what many call casinos in disguise, these games continue evolving and adapting to new laws with the same ingenuity that made them profitable in the first place, leading us to a surprising revelation. Perhaps the elements that influence gacha games stretch back further than you might think. Long before the tentpoles, loot boxes, and microtransactions, human societies were already wrestling with very similar impulses. The thrill of chance and the allure of collection. To trace their true origins, we'll need to look beyond video games and into the deeper history of why chance and randomness captivate humanity so much. Forming an understanding of whatever a gacha game is requires going way back to a time when civilization itself was taking shape. Because the truth is, humanity's fascination with gambling dates back to the very start of recorded history itself. At its core, gambling requires three elements: a wager, a random event, and the promise of a reward. This basic recipe has endured for millennia, ever since the die games of old Mesopotamia, telling us that technology may advance and the methods may change, but human nature stays remarkably consistent when maintaining these aspects alone. This shows that across civilizations, patterns emerge. Wherever humans competed, wagering followed, be it in races, animal fights, a diverse range of sports, or even games. Early governments and religions couldn't stamp gambling out completely. The urge to test fortune almost seems hardwired into humanity. At first glance, this makes the connection obvious. The same elements that define gambling, like risk, reward, and randomness, they're all in modern gacha mechanics. But this is where the story takes a turn, because gacha games didn't spring fully formed from casino culture. No, their true ancestry follows a different trail, one that leads us to perhaps humanity's most enduring entertainment invention: playing cards. The history of those began in Tang Dynasty China, where the first playing cards entered the historical record. They began as hand-painted slips of paper that would eventually travel through the Silk Road towards medieval Europe through Islamic traders. At the time of their arrival in the 1300s, they had some resemblance to the decks of today, though they always had one very important feature: the blank face that conveyed no information, that planted a seed of chance that made shuffles feel fresh, every round of the game different and interesting. Later, as printing technology and society advanced towards the 18th century, enterprising merchants turned cards into advertisements, now calling them trade cards. They boasted elaborate engravings of shops and wares, but later depicting all manner of colorful, curious, and intricate scenes. Unwittingly, they'd created the first collectible card economy, where beauty alone could dictate value. The arrival of the Industrial Revolution mechanized this collection allure. Tobacco companies slipped stiffening cards into cigarette packs, but realized they were able to drive sales as much as the original product with their appealing pop culture depictions. The public loved these miniatures for the sheer thrill of collection. Then baseball cards came around at the tail end of the 19th century and the start of the 20th. Chasing cards wasn't just about the art anymore, now that famous athletes and teams were brought into the equation. A single gum or cigarette packet could buy you a piece of their memorabilia. And if it wasn't the one you wanted, you could always trade with someone else that had it. Situations like this made the secondary market explode, proving regular people will always pay to play the odds, even when the house never showed its cards. Strategic card games like Bridge evolved separately from the previously established collector's market for decades. It wasn't until 1993 that a man named Richard Garfield revolutionized them into Magic the Gathering. This was the watershed moment that birthed the modern trading card game genre as we know it. One of the core features Magic brought into the mainstream was the booster pack, an ingenious method for incentivizing trading and deck building, but at the same time fostered a secondary market that valued cards for collectible and strategic reasons alike. In the following years, many would adopt the system and make it the standard in trading card games. However, Magic and the TCG's full impact on gambling mechanics will have to wait a bit, because years before Magic stormed the world, a different revolution was brewing in Japan. One disruptive invention will gift Asia the machine whose name now echoes all throughout modern gaming. Japan's culture is steeped in respect for tradition. Its blend of Shinto and Buddhist influences can be seen in their seasonal rituals carrying immense symbolic value, which is translated into several aspects of their everyday life, like commerce. Japanese preconceptions about chance and fortune have helped customs like Fukubukuro or lucky bags catch on since their inception more than 100 years ago. They are a staple of the Japanese New Year. The concept was allegedly invented by Ginza's Matsuya department store in the late Meiji period to get rid of any remaining or unwanted stock from last year, as superstition dictates a person must start the year clear of any unwanted items. Influenced by this culture, around the year 1965, inside malls in Tokyo's Taito Ward, a peculiar new machine appeared. At first glance, it resembled a Western vending machine, those that usually dispense bubblegum or even toys. But these metal boxes just dispense gum or loose prizes like those the Cracker Jack brand were already putting inside their caramel popcorn packaging since the 1920s back in America. The breakthrough came in the form of transparent plastic capsules. Now every purchase became a miniature spectacle, as the customer watched the prize rattle through the mechanism before reaching their hands. And that distinctive sound as the crank turned to deliver toys was the one responsible for birthing the name gashapon. These machines quickly spread across Japan, and soon to countries like China, Korea, Singapore, and beyond. But their true explosion came in 1977, when toy titan Bandai entered the scene, with their name remaining synonymous with gashapon worldwide to this day. With trademark control around the world, Bandai cracked the formula to sell small, inexpensive toys and imbue them with perceived value. One pull, one mystery capsule. The randomness was the point. The turn of the crank carried the same uncertainty as the spin of a slot machine. Bandai's genius was in what came after the gamble, because these were far from ordinary toys. They were tiny pieces of someone's favorite universe. Bandai leveraged their licenses successfully. Gundam, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, they generated the collector's itch, the need to complete the set, a situation where value wasn't dictated by the materials and craftsmanship of the toy itself. Despite their popularity in Asian territories, gashapon culture never quite conquered the West, but Bandai kept innovating their line of vending machines in Japan, and 11 years later, in 1988, released Cardass. These stations dispensed trading and collectible cards based on popular anime and manga of the time. But with the arrival of the 90s and Magic the Gathering's release, while Pokemon was exploding globally, Bandai shifted the focus of Cardass. Cards with mere collectible value weren't enough anymore. Players wanted strategy, competition, and stakes. One of their answers came in the form of Data Cardass in 2005, merging physical cards with digital gameplay, scanning the prices into arcade battles. When it came to collectible and trading card games, the gamble remained, and gameplay value was now strategic, becoming another factor that increasingly drove demand. But with this, the puzzle pieces are starting to lock into place. By the dawn of the 21st century, most of the elements that make modern gacha games were already circulating in the Japanese wild. The first was the thrill and frenzy of pulling from vending machines like Gashapon and Cardass. And the second, the strategy card games like Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, added with their deck building systems, incentivized by booster packs that added layers of chance, collection, and trading to the games. All that remained for this snowball of risk and reward to grow larger was making one final leap from plastic and cardboard to the devices in everyone's pockets. This step will take gachas the longest to make, as the technology of the early 2000s was weighed down by their own limitations. Those massive audiences chased worldwide by modern video games remain unreachable. It will still take some time for the world to be ready for the wave of video games and monetization practices that will arise during the course of the next decade. By the turn of the century, video games had come a long way from their first commercial successes like Pong, going on to conquering living rooms worldwide and slithering into schools as educational tools, while also being commonly found in offices because of the Windows operating system, including games like Solitaire and Minesweeper. Before the new millennium, the internet was still plagued by loading times. Some early web browser games like Neopets thrived, and multi-user dungeons appealed to niche audiences, but dial-up connections' screeching limitations kept online gaming as a fringe hobby. This would eventually change dramatically when broadband became the standard in the early 2000s. making games explode with possibilities. Games like Ultima Online, once restricted by lag and tiny player bases, were suddenly thriving in this new world. Western online games during this period chased after monthly subscription systems, with games like World of Warcraft and EVE Online, while Eastern developers like Nexon took a radical approach with 2004's MapleStory, pioneering a new model with free entry, but including a vibrant in-game shop that sold everything from cute cosmetics to time-saving XP boosts, among other conveniences. Though many credit Bethesda's now infamous horse armor found in 2006 The Elder Scrolls Oblivion as the microtransaction pioneer, the truth is honestly hiding in plain sight, as years before, Asian MMOs had already perfected the microtransactions brought on by the free-to-play model by exploiting accessibility and vanity. Soon these micropayments spread across gaming in general, energy systems, paywalls, waiter pay mechanics, all being perpetuated in the West by games like Farmville or Mafia Wars on Facebook, even reaching mainstream AAA appeal thanks to EA's FIFA and its notorious practices in Ultimate Team. But Asian platforms like Mixi built entire ecosystems around being gaming-first social networks. Though these hubs will later fade, their mark on the freemium model will be way more relevant than themselves years after their inception. By 2010, the numbers spoke for themselves. The free-to-play model was extremely profitable, and projects around the globe scrambled to find a way to harness it, which puts Konami on the spotlight. This well-known titan has its hands in every Japanese line of business that dealt with entertainment. Video games, arcade cabinets, trading cards, and even supplying casinos with slot machines and pachinkos. Their properties were present in every part of Japanese culture, virtually weaponizing a century of player psychology when designing their next venture. One of which will arrive in 2010 with the release of Dragon Collection, taking advantage of another Japanese social gaming platform by publishing them to Gree, which at the time had 10 million registered users, connecting the game to a large audience that accessed the social network on the daily, checking the news or chatting away with others, just like any other similar service. The game itself was a typical card battler, but beneath, it evoked elements seen in gashapon vending machines and collectible card games of decades past, with the way you obtain cards used during gameplay, and the necessity to get more of them to become stronger. But this doesn't mean Konami and the Dragon Collection franchise invented gacha games, or were the first to think about the elements that constituted one. In neighboring South Korea, Nexon had been refining these mechanics since the dial-up era. Being a pioneer in the MMO genre, their experience in the field defined the modern free-to-play model, which was a large factor in play when creating the monetization systems seen in games like Mabinogi Heroes, or Vindictus, as it's known in the West, which predated the release of Dragon Collection by mere months, with its cosmetic loot boxes arguably being just a continuation of those randomized cosmetics seen years before in MapleStory. These factors will crown Konami's Dragon Collection as the one game that presented the system in its first functional and efficient state, the first recognized gacha game. The dopamine delivery system that will spawn several imitators later in history and draw the attention of the Japanese and eventually many other governments. This doesn't diminish Nexon's role in the propagation of the gacha model, as the company's future video game titles will cement them as one of the main players of this new revolution, while Konami instead chose to take a backseat approach to video games altogether, electing to remain in the safety of arcades and casinos, cashing in on their already established franchises. In the end, pinpointing which was the first gacha game could matter less than recognizing when the turning point happened. The early 2000s established the blueprint that countless companies will attempt to replicate in the coming years, with unnumbered games fading into obscurity, only a select few achieving staggering, sometimes concerning, success. What began as niche mechanics in mobile games will eventually blur boundaries between what is entertainment and what is compulsion, growing from Asian cultural quirks to veritable global phenomenons. The journey that began with Gambling's Dawn and traveled all the way to digital monetization isn't ending, as every embarrassing and high-profile failure, every success, and every forgotten game has an untold story to tell, with every ethical debate causing new innovations to emerge. Before the end, we still have to answer our 3 original questions in a concrete way. First, what is a gacha game? Well, calling them games with a gacha system is really not exactly accurate, as the system itself shares many similarities with booster packs and loot boxes, now more than ever when they're also distributing virtual items. But for now, we could say it's the presentation of the monetization and pooling system itself what makes a game like Dragon Collection a gacha game, emphasizing it before developing any complex gameplay. Gacha games that came after will have to contend with either being a game or a gambling system first. Answering where did they come from is pretty easy, with Japan being the most logical response, though virtually most of the world pitched something in, as absurd as it sounds, even if it's the Asian countries and their peculiar cultures the one that synthesized them into gacha games. As for the question about how this controversial model becomes so commonplace in today's gaming sphere, now that's a question that will have to be answered periodically, as this video only showed the start of the storm to come. Many tales will have to be weaved into the fabric of gaming's history soon after Dragon Collection's release. As we reach the end of this chapter, I can only say something I've heard spoken by many players tangled up with these games in one way or another. The next poll could change everything.